Hey everyone, we are back again with the another episode in our Salesforce adoption webinar series. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day here. This series will be regularly held. This is one of our many series we are getting up till the Dreamforce 2019. And on this series, we feature and pick some of the best brains out there from Salesforce MVP, Salesforce veterans, and Salesforce customers to bring the best of the stuff here. So let me start with the introductions. My name is Rajesh Bhattal. I'm the sales ops guy. Think of me as the product manager for the sales and growth teams at Walkthroughs here. So we have Mike Martin here. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience today?
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today, and thanks Walkthroughs and Rajesh for having me. I am the Chief Customer Officer at 10K Advisors. I'll talk a little bit more about 10K here in a bit. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 11 years. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I also lead the Indianapolis admin community group. So excited to be here today to talk a little more about Centers of Excellence.
So glad to have you with us today, Mike. I mean, and Mike had a few conversations before we started with the webinar, and so much interesting stuff happening in the Salesforce ecosystem, and a lot of stuff happening with the 10K Advisors. So Mike, why don't you tell our audience here about a little about the 10K Advisors, so they have an idea of what's 10K Advisors, what's your role at 10K Advisors, and what 10K Advisors brings to customers and the ecosystem at large.
Absolutely. So 10K is a registered Salesforce partner. We've been in the ecosystem for about 5 years, really helping. Our mission, as we say it, is to give people the freedom to do the work that they love. That's both for our customers and for our experts. So our model is a little bit different. We are a network of independent contractors and small consulting companies, really providing mid to large size companies with on-demand access to proven Salesforce talent. We have a curated community of about 400 experienced Salesforce experts across the US, UK, and India. We really try to make it easy for our customers to work with us. So we have a friction-free approach to getting started and delivering results very, very quickly. And we have a willingness to be honest and prescriptive when others won't. Some of the best consultants have really good ways of saying no, and we pride ourselves in that, and helping customers see the best path forward, even though it may not be what they see from the beginning. So that's 10K. As Chief Customer Officer, I own all of our customer relationships and really ensure that our customers are successful in what they do.
Cool stuff, Mike. I mean, 400 experienced Salesforce experts are pretty huge. Now that folks here know us by our faces and trust us enough, I think we can go on the, we can turn off the videos and continue the rest of the conversations ahead, right? Before we go live, I just wanted to tell a little bit about Walkthroughs. Walkthroughs is a digital adoption solution. We help enterprises across the world with adoption on their web applications. Simply put, we help your end users be more productive in any web and hybrid mobile applications. You'll see a lot of action, Walkthroughs in action by the end of this webinar. We'll show you how we help enterprises, right? So a few housekeeping rules before we go live, right? All the attendees are muted for the period of this webinar. You can ask questions anytime. We highly encourage that you do not wait till the end of this webinar to ask questions. We'll answer your questions in a dedicated Q&A session, and this session is being recorded. So don't worry, we'll send you a link to this recording. So you don't have to really worry about making notes. So concentrate on the questions, concentrate on any ideas that you might have or queries you might have here. And since consultants you usually hire consultants for the paid service, right? And fun fact, you have Mike here, so you might as well ask questions and get them answered for free, right? So the agenda, let's set out the agenda for the webinar here. We'll discuss what's Center of Excellence and why is it really important, right? How do you go about setting one in your organization? What are the objectives, and how do you execute the process, right? And without really measuring the whole project, it's pointless, right? So what are those few metrics you really concentrate on? And how does this help the Salesforce adoption at large, which is the whole gist of this story here, right? And how do you deliver COE with what are the training and learning methods that you can use to go ahead? All right, so what we really did before we hopped into this webinar is we looked at our registrants and bracketed them into different categories. And this is totally the list of registrants we had for this webinar. We have like 12% of CXOs, VPs, and directors. You'll also notice that a lot of Salesforce admins and consultants and managers, right? So Mike, to start off with, right? What is Salesforce Center of Excellence, right? If you look at Walkthroughs at large, I am the sales ops guy here. We have a partner ops. We have a CS ops. So if you look at these, we are 3 individual contributors coordinating amongst ourselves to bring at large the coordination between different teams for a smoother working of the teams at large. So looking at our own resistance, this is the kind of audience we have. So Mike, can you introduce what is Center of Excellence?
Sure. I really see the Center of Excellence as a way for companies to coordinate better between various teams and stakeholders, like you mentioned, sales ops, CS ops, partner ops, and work with those stakeholders in an organization to standardize process and drive efficiency. This helps create a better overall experience for users and teams. And the difference with a COE is that it's intentional. It's a focus on excellence versus just hoping every project is going to go well or on a functionality basis. Hey, I think this functionality is going to work. Is it really going to make an impact for your organization? So user feedback early and often is one of those things that I often think about as one of the key aspects of Agile, but also needs to be a key aspect of the Center of Excellence.
Yeah, I mean, intentional focus on excellence, that truly stands out, Mike, right? There's this rule of 150, also called as the Dunbar's number, which states that 150 is the cognitive limit when we stop basically identifying one-on-one relationships beyond 150. And I can already imagine how chaotic it gets when your number of users increase, right? And with Salesforce, when the number of users increase, the chaos, you basically are introducing chaos in the system. And now with multiple stakeholders and hundreds of Salesforce users in an implementation, the whole project can totally get chaotic and messy, right? So tell us, Mike, why is COE important?
A COE is important because it really gives structure and process around what you're trying to accomplish and really keeps the business goal in mind. And again, provides that feedback from stakeholders. 10K Advisors did some research over the summer called Project to Program, and we surveyed and interviewed 300 plus stakeholders that own or work in a Salesforce organization, really from very small all the way up through large enterprise organizations with thousands of users, hundreds of admins. And we found that 91% of those companies that report the highest level of ROI in their org have some sort of Center of Excellence or process control in place. And we actually asked them to grade their instance as well as a part of that research. And we found that 82% of those stakeholders grade their implementation as an A if they have a COE. So COEs are really important to both the return on investment, and we all know Salesforce is very expensive, but it can add value to your organization and you can see a return on that, but also can make you more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, 91% happy users seeing ROI on their investment seems pretty huge, Mike. I mean, tie that up with our own research at Walkthroughs. We see that less than 46% of sales reps use their company CRM. I mean, you're talking 46%, and tie that up that Salesforce is an expensive investment that turns out to be huge dollars left on the table, right? I can already imagine nightmares the business leaders have trying to get the ROI on their 6 or 7-figure dollar investments. So here, the Center of Excellence seems to totally channelize this investment into ROI. So Mike, tell us, how do you set up COE?
Well, just to comment on that number, I can believe it as a former admin as well as a former sales rep. I believe that 46% of sales reps use their CRM. So, in getting things started with a COE, we encourage our customers to get a COE set up as early as possible in their implementation, even before they start clicking in the system. It's really important to think about the big picture and develop a long-term roadmap, even before diving into just a small project or a pilot. So ensuring that stakeholder buy-in and prioritization early is important. It's also essential to install governance models for that organization to ensure delivery, quality, and documentation as quickly as possible. For nearly every new customer engagement at 10K Advisors, we recommend that at least a discussion about the key components of the COE happen, even if a formal COE isn't in place.
Yeah, I mean, so a solid plan in numbers and flowcharts on a whiteboard seems like a great way to plan before a huge investment. Totally makes sense. You might as well plan on how to get the dollars worth before investing, right? An objective, among other things, usually at large is a guide to action, right? So what are the primary action expected when you set up a COE?
Yeah, so COE can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In our world, it kind of boils down to about 5 key things. So one is team roles and structure. So who's on the team? What do they do? What are they responsible for? How do you articulate responsibilities? And how do you define and develop solutions related to those roles? Delivery standards and process. This is kind of probably the first thing most people think about when they think about COE. So what do you have in place to ensure you deliver capabilities to the business in a predictable and consistent way? Next up is governance, change, and release management. These are kind of the key things of, hey, we know what we've built, it's ready to go. How do we release that to the organization? So is there a governance process around approvals before releases? How are you bringing organizational change to play? Are you just saying, hey, this new feature is live, or is there a formalized process around change enablement, informing users, giving users training and adoption? And that leads into the next point here, end user support processes. How do you ensure your users get the answers and solutions they need in a timely manner to increase usage and adoption? So is that support process in place? Do users have someone to contact once everything is live? Have you communicated those changes in real time? And lastly is education and growth. We see so many Salesforce implementations go stagnant after go live because no one's really focusing on continuous improvement and education of their users. So, when you're building your COE, how do you and your team keep up with a constantly expanding Salesforce platform? Salesforce buys at least 10 or 15 companies a year. 1 or 2 of those are pretty big and pretty impactful. And how do your stakeholders stay up to date on what's new? Is it just going to Dreamforce, or are there other kind of succinct plans in place to keep your team up to speed?
Yeah. When there are multiple stakeholders, you totally see this one, right? You lose the momentum post implementation. So one of the most critical implementations, right? A critical question that comes to mind is, when do you start planning setting up a COE? Do you make the Salesforce purchase and then say, okay, now let's put a plan in place, or do you start making that whole plan before even you make that purchase?
Honestly, we recommend to our customers that they start planning as early as possible, because it's super essential that you have that plan in place before you dive in. Not a lot of organizations think about that, so it is obviously possible to put a COE in place once you're live. But if you have the opportunity before an implementation to start thinking intentionally about how you want to approach and what the roadmap needs to look like, we recommend that.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So now that we talked about what COE is and what the objectives are and who the stakeholders, right? The natural question next is, how do you really measure the success of the COE, right? There's this beautiful saying, what cannot be measured cannot be managed. And someone who's worked in data analysis, I can totally agree to that. So tell us, Mike, what are these key metrics and variables we can use to measure the COE? If it's really executed well, or we need course correction as we implement it in the phased manner.
Yeah, there's a few that are pretty easy to measure that we see in many of our customers, things like a revenue increase. And, you kind of see in again, this research that we put together over the summer, we broke it down by stakeholder, either the line of business, so business owners that were responding, or potentially the IT folks. And, this is how existing Salesforce customers measure their implementation. So a revenue increase, that one's probably pretty easy to correlate. Hey, we went live in January, we saw a revenue increase in Q1 and Q2. Productivity increase, how are you measuring how your employees are productive? Are you looking at number of activities or deal flow? Those kinds of things are important to measure. Cost savings, obviously important. Were you able to sunset 3 or 4 systems as a part of a release or an implementation? How are we being more efficient with our time, allowing 7 reps to do what 10 reps used to accomplish? And then how can we reassign those 3 folks into new roles and continue to grow the organization? User satisfaction scores. I think an important part of a COE is to put some sort of formal measurements in place. And we do this as implementation partners, but encourage our customers to do it as well with their end users of how successful is this for me in a day-to-day basis, and do that on a continual basis, maybe quarterly. survey your users and see how is the system impacting them on a regular basis. A number of other things here. Open help tickets. Does that decrease after a functionality goes live? What is your user adoption number? I thought this one was really interesting, that only 32% of the line of business felt that user adoption was an important metric. I think that they may be off a little bit there. And then customer specific metrics as well. You might have a particular number or metric that you're using as a part of your specific business.
Some pretty interesting metrics here. I mean, we talked about stakeholders, right? I mean, I can totally correlate, right? Revenue increase is if a CXO is involved and a business head is involved, they totally want to see the revenue increase, right? To tying up with that investment. Coming down to the productivity increase, again, that ties up. Coming down to the cost savings, totally ties up. And if the whole implementation doesn't really help my end users, the Salesforce users, the whole investment goes in for a toss. So totally see that 50% user satisfaction scores post implementation of COE is like a big deal to me. I mean, happy users is always what you really look at, right? You don't have to force implementation. You really want them to adopt that implementation. So some cool metrics here, Mike. Coming down to the next question, which seems natural, right? There is this, I mean, this recently happened, right? As recently as early last week, right? There was this one specific instance. I know from a fellow sales ops guy at another startup. He's been trying to push a change in the CRM of how the data collection happens, right? And boy, he has run into huge hurdles since there are no champions for his cause, nor are the end users using the new functionalities, because they don't, I mean, for them, it's like one more to do in their bucket, right? So how does COE really help with adoption here? I mean, with no users, any product or service is rendered useless, right? No matter how awesome or useful it is. So how does COE help convey the ease of use and productivity gain at large?
Yeah, this is a common challenge that we see with many Salesforce implementations. A single stakeholder maybe has an idea of how to improve a system or process, but the broader organization doesn't really support these requests because there isn't a formal way to request or for these requests to be prioritized, communicated, and rolled out. There's really no delivery process to ensure capabilities that impact the business are consistently delivered. In this case, a COE would help our sales ops friend with a formal request process, as well as end user support, which will help the entire organization, including end users, see the value in the data collection process to increase usage and adoption.
So basically in that, we are seeing with COE a solid process and centralized management, which helps the end users see the value in data collection and helps the Salesforce admins steer through the change easily. So I can already see the value of COE making users at both the ends of the spectrum happy, right? So Mike, having been a Salesforce admin for years myself, now I know one thing by now, right? Salesforce very power is its biggest curse, and it's out of the box ability to customize the solution. I mean, the n number of ways you can really customize Salesforce to your own needs is, I mean, it's so diverse, and sometimes it gets you confused. It really complicates the whole system. So Mike, you want to talk about how do we make this superpower work for us all Salesforce superheroes and Wonder Women out there?
Yeah, this is such a good question because, personally, I'm an accidental admin and I fell in love with the Salesforce platform 11 years ago because it was so customizable and I could do 90 to 95% of what I needed to be able to do without writing any code, which was incredible for me. And I was off and running, making changes in production, adding fields, creating objects. And after a year, I had created a mess for myself. I didn't have a good way of prioritizing work, sharing new functionality with users or anything like that. So we did get better, but if I had had a COE or a formal release and governance process from the very beginning of my role as an admin, I would have been in a better place. So having these types of process controls can slow down the process a little bit, but it really bolsters, but doesn't hurt innovation, because when new functionality is released on a set release schedule per the governance process, users are able to absorb and adopt the new functionality well and see how it impacts them.
Sure. No, that's a fun fact, Mike. I did not know you were an accidental Salesforce user, and now you are an MVP with a decade's experience. I mean, you have seen Salesforce's iterations, changes, rollout. Like they say, right? All love is accidental, and it seems like your Salesforce love turned out to be accidental, Mike, right?
Exactly.
So moving on. So what are the different methods of delivering COE? I mean, we have a lot of training materials and learning methods, right? So what would be a few different methods that you roll out COE?
Yeah, effective training and learning should be a key component of any COE. We've already talked about that today. So where I recommend folks start is the free tool that Salesforce has provided called Trailhead. So if you haven't logged into Trailhead yet, it's an incredible platform. There's new content coming out every week or every month. There's some great stuff out there for every stakeholder within the Salesforce ecosystem, both end users as well as admins and members of your COE. So take advantage of Trailhead as well as other Salesforce documentation that's provided. Another key piece that I like to call out is videos and webinars. Hey, you've made a great step. You're on a webinar like this, but how do you take this type of information and share it back with your organization? I really believe in real quick, impactful videos. And I'm talking 2 to 4 minutes, very short, highlighting new pieces of functionality or something that you learned at Dreamforce, taking that back to your organization. Most of us in the world these days have short attention spans and aren't going to sit down and watch an hour of content. So if you could break it down into quick hitting short videos. Obviously, things like in-person training are incredibly essential when you're rolling out a new system, but keeping in mind user engagement and feedback is a part of that, as well as just-in-time or on-the-job training. I think mentoring is one of the best ways for folks to learn. So pairing them up with someone that's a super user and kind of getting those folks, find your champions early that can provide that mentorship to other users as well.
Yeah, I mean, having been a Salesforce administrator myself, I can totally relate to this, right? I've used these traditional methods to learn myself, like Trailhead, absolutely amazing gamification. There are tons of documentation available, like you mentioned. Salesforce has a slew of videos on their own YouTube channel, right? And again, in-person training. But it gets quite really interesting here, right? I mean, I can see that the videos and webinars, if standalone, they're hard to measure consumption when it's from an end user, assuming it's a huge organization with multiple Salesforce users, asking them to go check out videos and all. I can see that being hard to measure. In-person training, of course, amazing, but at scale, again, it looks like cost and time intensive, right? I mean, when it comes to Trailhead and other documentation, this is my most recent experience, right? Well, we recently rolled out multi-currency at Whatfix, since we have customers paying us in multiple currencies, local currencies, right? And in the absence of Whatfix, as an admin, I would have gone through Trailhead and other documentation, taught myself, which perhaps would have taken me a couple of hours at best, to a few days to educate myself. Interestingly, at Walkthroughs, we use Walkthroughs, right? Of course. So at Walkthroughs, interestingly, we already have a flow built, a walkthrough built, which shows the admins where exactly to go enable the features and alert them to replications of enabling that multi-currency, right? So what do you think? I mean, from your experience, Mike, which is, I mean, how does each of these trainings look like? I mean, I can see that just in time or the on-the-job training where Walkthroughs really has expertise, there is a huge cost benefit. There is a huge time saving. So what do you think in your experience is the best method out there?
Yeah, again, I really think kind of those quick hits, short on the job, in context types of situations are the best for most users. But you also have to keep in mind that not everybody learns the same way. So some folks are going to want to sit down and watch and do. Personally, I'm a hands-on learner, so I want to be able to get into the system, kind of make mistakes, and then figure out what I did wrong along the way. So it does depend per user.
Yeah. So coming to how Salesforce and Whatfix ties up, right? Assume we just wanted to bring context here, right? How Whatfix and Salesforce ties up. So assume you create a walkthrough, one showing your new user on how to go and create a new opportunity, or perhaps a lead, how do you create a contact, or perhaps an account, right? So while the flow guides them through one of your user sites, right? We create walkthroughs using Whatfix. You can totally create that. And if your user expects, if only I also had a PDF document, right? But you can totally act as a genie if you had Whatfix on your solution, because your wish is granted. This is what exactly you'd tell your user, right? Because when you create a walkthrough using Whatfix, a PDF is automatically generated. Whatfix intelligently creates a PDF in the backend. When I first went through the product training, when I joined Whatfix, I was amazed. But then again, this happened, right? I told myself that since it's already creating a PDF, maybe it should have also gone ahead and created a slideshow. Turns out it does create a slideshow too. And before you look at it, we are also again creating a video recording of the whole solution. So you can already imagine the adoption is so quick, so fast. I mean, it's all at one point you feel when the product does more than you expect, it's kind of magical, right? So, but then they, you know what, they say, seeing is believing. And since we have a lot of different folks from different roles join us on the webinar today, we thought we'll show some of the things Whatfix does in action, right? So say this is one of our onboarding walkthroughs. This is how exactly a new user is onboarded. This is how you're telling them, you go to profile, this is where you click settings, and this is where you update, change your password. As an admin, I can tell you, whenever someone is new to Salesforce ecosystem, I've had so many people reach out to me asking for what's my password, right? That's as awkward as that sounds. That's one of the things you repeatedly hear too. And this is one of the walkthroughs that clearly shows Whatfix in action, right? They don't really have to reach out to you, and if you're huge, they don't really have to raise a ticket. They don't really have to wait for someone to respond. So you can see cost saving, you can see productivity increase. It's all happening on the go. The next one here, right? We're talking here, look at the task list. You can create a list of tasks for your users to do, and you can track this in the backend, right? If they have completed the course, you can look this at as a course. This one here shows how do you create the opportunity, right? And how do you go about saving this one, right? If you're a huge organization, a typical challenge is this one. You start building your Salesforce instance. Like I told in the beginning of this webinar, Salesforce's biggest strength is also its curse, right? And the amount of diversification and customization you could do is just mind-boggling and amazing. But assume one of your business leaders or your VP of sales says, on the opportunity now, I also want to see one of the important fields, who's the primary contact here, or who's the important designation. I want users to fill that, right? You introduce that change. In a typical non-Whatfix world, you maybe mail them saying that this is a new change we have deployed and everyone's got to do that. Or perhaps in case of Whatfix here, you totally have multiple ways of alerting them, right? Maybe someone logs in and they already have a pop-up saying, we introduced this new change. Or maybe you have a beacon, which is just a small beacon alert on that specific field, right? Or maybe you could also clearly walk them through a new field saying that this is a new field we introduced and you got to fill. And in the task list here, you could totally see that. You could track this in the backend, how many users have really completed this task. That is the beauty of this whole solution, right? This is one of our next walkthroughs, right? We are saying here, it's all real-time 24/7 contextual help. This is all self-help is what we are showing you here, right? People really don't have to wait to ask questions. Over a period of time, when you really interact with the users, you know that there are set few 5, 10 questions everyone's gonna ask you. You might as well create an FAQ of that one. In a traditional way, basically you create that FAQ and send a link to that, maybe link it over to Google Drive and tell them that this is a document of all the FAQs, which means they go outside of the Salesforce ecosystem and try doing. Or perhaps in this case, in Whatfix's case, we put that, I mean, we bring all the solutions to where users are rather than asking the user to go where the solution is kept, right? Here we're saying, you want self-help, you have questions, just search for it, and you have the information here, as beautiful as it gets. And one of the most beautiful things on the self-help here I wanted to bring to attention is that you can add all your articles from your existing knowledge base automatically. You don't really have to recreate that from the scratch. You could just link it here and bring it down to where users are. And this one is what shows you Whatfix editor in action. This is how a Whatfix admin, basically, if you have Whatfix on your Salesforce instance, this is how you create the flows, right? This is how you see you're creating the flows which your end users will use. You go to contact, for example, here we are showing how to go to contacts and create a new contact. This is how you create. As simple as that. I mean, you're just clicking intuitively. Again, Whatfix's editor is intelligent enough to already pre-fill the data for you, like click new, all the details. You could customize, and you could, in fact, create your own personal branding on these ones, right? So it's very closely knit to your own organization. So this one, again, very recently, by the way, pretty recently, Gartner identified Whatfix as one of the experts in the digital adoption space. And as is totally visible on the slide here, you can see two things here. One, traditional product adoption, and what is the product adoption look like with Whatfix on board, right? To put into perspective, the traditional product adoption versus product adoption with Whatfix is for an enterprise with 5,000 sales reps. This gap translates into $6.5 million in savings. Can you believe that this gap you're seeing? This is how it translates into, and this is exactly what we're tying up, right? This is exactly the real world problem that we're trying to solve here at Walkthroughs. Coming down to the impact of the Walkthroughs digital guidance platform, right? Digital adoption solution. This is what you're looking at, right? You're reducing the support overhead, right? You're looking at basically 45% reduction in the support, where people will stop raising tickets if they already know how to solve. You saw that in action in self-help, right? People really don't have to ask or wait for a ticket if they can find themselves. You're reducing the training creation cost. You could as well push a new content within the context. And at the end of the day, every end user wants to be happy, right? They want to be productive. When we say productivity, there is an interesting stat here, right? Our 2018 Forbes survey puts that sales reps spend only 35% of their time selling. Can you believe that? 35% of their time into selling, and rest of their time is spent into administrative juggling around. So user productivity in that case has direct correlation to how easy do you make administrative course for them. And with Walkthroughs on board, we are saying 25% reduction in the time spent on knowledge discovery. And here how these are a few of our customers, and this is what they say. Taking the example, let's take an example, Experian, which is a multinational consumer credit reporting company with an approximately $5 billion in revenues, and they have over 16,000 employees. So imagine one of their key challenges was low user engagement. And another one was new employee onboarding challenges. Every time they have a new employee joining, they go through the traditional method of training them, and user engagement is low. Every time they push a new change in the CRM, they still struggle. So with Walkthroughs on board, the training time is down by 50%. Can you imagine that? I mean, it's a huge difference for an organization with 16,000 plus employees. The training content creation is down by 60%, and the adoption time is down by 50%. It's huge, and you would totally note that the other customers see significant value with the Walkthroughs solution on board. These are some of the customers spanning across different geographies, spanning across different industries that use Walkthroughs. Just to put into perspective, right? See, I'm not a sales guy, so I really don't have to make a sales pitch here. I'm a sales ops guy, right? Which means every customer-facing employee within the organization turns out to be my customer. So for me, it's pretty simple, right? The way I look at, I trust anything is I look at stats, right? And even before, and to put things into perspective, our 4.7 star rating on G2 Crowd should tell you how happy our customers are, right? That identifying Walkthroughs as a digital expert in digital adoption space tells you that one of the most prominent research and advisory firm out there independently validates our expertise. And our 4.5 star rating on Glassdoor tells that how happy employees are building amazing products, solving real life problems out there. So for me as a sales ops guy, this strikes, right? This trinity of happy customers, expert products validation, and happy employees should affirm your faith in what we are building at Walkthroughs, right? So towards the end of the webinar, this is what I want to bring. Dreamfix giveaways. Of course, every year we are a significant presence at Dreamforce, and we have a lineup of events happening. In fact, your chances of winning the giveaways just increased by signing up to this webinar. We made sure that people signing up to webinars have their own probability increased, and also we're signing up more questions asked to the chances of winning. And this link that you see, you can totally register and enroll yourself to winning this into the contest. Having said that, we'll send this link in an email, so you really don't have to remember and type this, right? We are a groundbreaker sponsor at Dreamforce this year, and we have exciting giveaways. In fact, we tie your chances, like I said, to the Q&As and the webinars attended. Now the floor is open for Q&A. So if you have any questions, now is the time that you ask. We already have a few questions. So we have our friend Nathan Bobby asked here. There's a question, Mike, for you. Is the COE pyramid applicable to all functions, sales, service, marketing, and etc.?
It really is, yes. The COE should cover every function of the business related to Salesforce. So you should have business stakeholders involved in each of those individual areas involved in your COE. Typically, it's going to be led by an operations team or whoever owns Salesforce for the organization, if that's IT, if that's sales ops, if it's business. But it really should cover every piece of functionality that is covered in Salesforce. So when I was an admin, we were a primarily sales organization, but we also had customer service, we had legal, and we had a number of other teams involved as well. So making sure that we're prioritizing work across all of those is incredibly important.
I totally agree. From my own experience, I can tell that, in fact, our product team also has a lot of say in how our own CRM architecture is built, right? If a deal is going, presume we have a deal that we lost to a feature gap, right? My product team would want to know. So they have a say right from the beginning on how the architecture is built. Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the answer. And next question is from Jessica. So it's a question for us. We have a homegrown software. Can Walkthroughs work on it? Well, fun fact. Totally. As long as it's a web browser supported application, we work like a charm. Sorry, the next question, Mike, this one's for you. So how long does it take, it's from our friend John, by the way, how long does it take to implement a COE?
That's a good question. You know, you can implement a COE very quickly if you have organizational buy-in, but typically it is going to take a little bit of time to kind of get the function in place. It'll depend on how often you want to release, but starting a COE can be as simple as convening a group of folks to talk about it, and really your COE has been created. So it could be as simple as a day, but it really is going to take time to impact the business.
All right, sounds good. So Stuart has a question. How much time does it take to deploy Walkthroughs, right? I mean, interesting question. So the whole idea of Walkthroughs at Walkthroughs is we are saying cost cutting. We are cutting down the time and cost savings, right? So it takes as little as 2 days, right? But on an average, if your solution is complicated, the unit of measurement at Walkthroughs is pretty simple. How complicated is your customer? How complicated and customized is your Salesforce instance? And how many walkthroughs do you want to build, right? If you created a customized solution, say you created a multiple fields and validations within the opportunity, right? It gets as complicated as that. So totally depends on the number of flows you're creating to do that one. So on an average, it takes say 3 to 4 weeks, but as little as 2 days to go live. We have a, by the way, okay, Stuart has another question. Can I set up a one-on-one? Totally, we'd love to. Yeah, by the way, you can totally write us to us at engage@walkthroughs.com, or of course, you can also write at sales@walkthroughs.com for the demo. Totally happy to walk you through. So Mike, we have a follow-up question from our friend Nathan, who leads COE when multiple functions use Salesforce, like sales, marketing, and service? So yeah, it's a pretty good question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so Mike, Nathan had a follow-up question. So who leads COE when there are multiple stakeholders involved? How do you decide which team or which role should be leading this whole huge project?
Yeah, great question. And that's going to vary organization to organization, but typically whoever owns the Salesforce instance is going to own the COE. So in a couple of cases with large organizations that I've talked to over time, they have stakeholders across actually like 7 or 8 different Salesforce orgs, but it is all owned by kind of the Salesforce team, which does live in the IT organization, but there are business folks involved in that as well. So, you know, successful COEs are cross-functional, but they're going to be led by whoever owns your Salesforce org.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I can see that sales operations has a 360-degree view of all that's happening, right? So it seems like pretty good, nicely poised to take that initiative. Would you agree to that, Mike?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You know, if sales ops owns Salesforce, then that would be a natural place for the COE.
Cool. So we have Ignacio. Mike, this is a question for you again. What is an ideal COE team size? At some point, more equals being less effective. Having spoken about Dunbar's number, I can totally see that the more the number of variables you introduce to the system, the more chaos it is. So yeah, a fantastic question. What's an ideal size?
Yeah, absolutely. So we find the most effective centers of excellence are really in the kind of the 5 to 10 person range. Not saying that you wouldn't want other folks involved in the overall process, but really it does come down to a small number of empowered decision makers that can collaborate across functions. So you want every function to be represented in that number, but you don't want 30 people in the room trying to make COE type decisions, because it's just not going to work.
So number of teams involved, each representative from each team is the right answer, right?
Exactly.
Cool, sounds good. So we have Paul asking, how many steps can you create in a Whatfix walkthrough? Nice question. My answer is in fact a question. In fact, how many steps would you want to create in a Whatfix walkthrough? So yeah, unlimited. It totally depends on you. We really don't have a cap on that one. Tim, how secure is Whatfix? Does it read my user data? Not really. I mean, we are just a layer on top of your application. We do not read any of your data. We are GDPR compliant. So yeah, going to all the technicalities, we are compliant to all the data protection laws across the globe. All righty. Do we have any questions? So it seems like we're running out of time. Having said that, we'll reply to any other questions that you have had over the email, right? We had fun time here. Mike, appreciate your time here. And coming out to answer real life questions here. I mean, 10K Advice is totally solving real life problems, and so glad that at Whatfix we are solving real life problems. So thank you so much for your time, Mike, and to all the attendees here. Totally appreciate that you took time to be on this webinar. I'm glad that we answered some of your questions, and we'll answer the others over the mail. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks, Mike.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.